Hello friend, I want to tell you about the Ford Fiesta car. If you are looking for a nice car, with many advantages, few disadvantages, relatively cheap and trouble-free in operation, you have a problem. There are very few such cars. However, the narrow group includes the 7th generation Ford Fiesta, which in the described engine version has basically only one disadvantage. As is usually the case in B-segment cars, the design of this car is simple and predictable. Anyone who has read about the sensational driving characteristics of this model and expects a complicated independent suspension at the rear will be pleasantly surprised. Despite the excellent tuning, there is only a torsion beam at the rear. Ford has shown that it does not have to be a disadvantage. Meanwhile, an equally simple McPherson strut with a triangular wishbone was used at the front. The steering system could have hydraulic or electric power steering. The rear brake system used drums, which does not prevent a short braking distance. Engines. The Ford Fiesta had a wide range of engines, including diesels. The basis was engines with a rather specific capacity designation of 1.25 L. Each manufacturer would designate these units as 1.2 L, but Ford had been using 1.25 for many years, which has become a tradition. The engine was available in two power versions, 60 and 80 to 82 HP. The larger 1.4-liter engine provided slightly better performance as it already had a serious power of 96 HP. The 1.6-liter engine in the sports version provided 120 HP. TDCI diesels with capacities from 1.4 to 1.6 L had power from 60 to 90 HP. Towards the end of the production of the pre-facelift model, the power of the 1.6 TDCI unit was increased to 95 HP. What's broken? Let's start with engine problems. The 1.25L unit in the weaker version has 60 HP and is, to put it brutally, a total sludge. Why am I writing about this? Well, you can be really surprised how weak such a nice car can be. This is not a joke. It really can happen that someone thinks about some kind of failure. If you buy the more powerful, 82 HP version, you will know what I am talking about. Here too, dynamics are hard to find, although the power is sufficient for normal driving, including on the road. The 1.25 Duratec engine is very refined and has basically no design flaws. Only at higher mileage can it consume oil, but the main cause is the dynamic driving style that users are forced to. This can also mean a slight leak in the engine. In general, there is nothing to complain about the engine mechanics. The gearbox is worse. The 1.25 unit worked only with a 5-speed manual, which can have problems even with small mileage. The reverse gear popping out all the time is nothing. It's worse when the forward gears start to disappear. It's clearly a problem with the control mechanism. Sometimes adjustment helps, sometimes replacing the cable, but sometimes the gearbox needs repair because it has suffered from a faulty mechanism. In cars used mainly in the city, the clutch wears out quickly. It is absolutely necessary to replace it along with the clutch release bearing. The worst thing is not that the problem with the gearbox control appears at a low mileage, and I do not mean a few dozen, but a few thousand kilometers. On the other hand, when buying a car with a mileage of over 100,000 kilometers, you can count on the fact that the previous owner eliminated the fault. Authorized services were reluctant to accept complaints. Some fought with ASO for a long time, and as a result, the fault was repaired in an independent workshop at their own expense. The running gear has no major problems with operation on European roads. Even poor road conditions do not negatively affect the comfort and quality of driving. The pleasure of driving this model is unfortunately paid for by minor problems with the steering gear, which sometimes knocks and rattles. There are play in the steering column. Sometimes the crosspiece needs to be replaced. Sometimes it will be necessary to replace the entire transmission, but this is not a particularly expensive component. What is worse is that, similarly to the gearbox, failures in some copies appeared quickly, at low mileage. Another cause of the rattle may be the drive joints that wear out quite quickly. The remaining chassis components wear out in normal time. The mileage of the vast majority of copies is still small and it is difficult to speak of any serious faults. This is a relatively young car and is most often used by women on short distances. There are also many fleet cars, but their intensive use is also specific. As with most other models, there are occasional problems with the electrics. The rule is simple: the better the equipment, the greater the probability of a fault. Users complain about light bulbs burning out quickly, which may be caused by high voltage in the installation. It is worth replacing the light bulbs with products with an extended life. The Ford Fiesta Mk7, like any other generation of this model, is a cheap car to run. The only problem may be the engine. Someone who likes a quiet ride won't complain, but people focused on dynamics should simply choose a more powerful drive unit. If you try to squeeze good performance out of 1.25L, you have medium chances of a satisfactory effect, and the fuel consumption will increase to 8L, 100 kilometers, which is the same as the sport version with a 120 horsepower engine. It is not recommended to install a gas system for this unit, and even if you do, it will be only something from a higher shelf. Valve adjustment is quite problematic because you have to change the glasses. It is better to install gas in the 1.4 Duratec. In selected markets, despite its aversion to LPG, Ford installed factory gas installations for this unit. There is no point in worrying about supposedly major problems with the gearbox or steering column. Although it looks serious, a good mechanic can repair the faults at a low cost and the car will be problem-free in these areas for a long time. In the chassis, the bushes are mainly replaced, but even if the non-replaceable wishbone pins wear out, the entire wishbone is not expensive. The rear brake system has drums, which are more durable and reliable than typical discs. Ford Fiesta is a problem-free car, and the faults you have read about are actually minor shortcomings that, once eliminated effectively, bring peace for a long time. Version 1.25 is recommended for people who are not demanding in terms of dynamics and do not want to invest in an LPG installation. It is not worth choosing a weaker version, even if it tempts with its price. In the Fiesta Mk7, 82 petrol horsepower is the minimum. Thank you for listening to me. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and rate my video. If you know of any problems with this car that I did not mention, be sure to write about them in the comments.
I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what breaks and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with, and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carme.pro.